Today I'm out here in Moab, Utah, the mecca of off-roading, where thousands of people come every year to tackle some of the toughest trails in the country or just to go out and explore some of the scenic beauty this place has to offer. But there are some unique things about this environment that can potentially break some things on your vehicle. And so in this video, we're going to meet with one of the owners of Dixie 4-wheel drive and talk about the 10 most common things that can break when you're out here in Moab, Utah. Stay tuned. Welcome to TrailRecon. I'm Brad. It is so good to be back in Moab, Utah. I love wheeling out here on some of the difficult trails and some of the scenic trails. It is a great place. If you have not come out here to do some off-roading, you should definitely plan a trip. You'll love it. But the truth is, for the many times that we've come out here, there have been a couple times where we've had some things break on our vehicles, whether it was me personally or the people I was with. And so there are some unique things that can happen when you're out here, and the folks at Dixie 4-wheel drive, boy, they see it all on a daily basis. And I thought in this video it'd be a great opportunity to speak with them about the 10 most common things that break, talk about what you can do to prevent those breakages, and what are some of the fixes that maybe you can do to get yourself off the trail and back to the shop to get a proper repair. I think this is going to be a really valuable conversation. Let's go inside and meet with the owner. Okay guys, I'm here with Milt, one of the owners of Dixie 4-wheel drive. Milt, thanks for taking the time to have a conversation with us about this. I think this is going to be a really rich conversation for folks.
No, you're welcome.
Talk to us before we dive into the top 10 list of the things that break out here. Talk to us a little bit about Dixie 4-wheel drive, what you guys do, how long you've been here.
Well, Dixie 4-wheel drive, this one is our second location. Our first shop is in St. George.
Okay.
Been there near 30 years. This location we opened in, I believe it was 18, right just before Safari of 18.
Okay. And you guys do a lot of repairs out here?
Lots of repair.
And you do some custom work?
We do custom work as well, but especially during Safari and that, we do a lot of repair work.
Yeah, and then we're going to dive into that. But let me ask you, is it fair to say that there is no vehicle, no aftermarket manufacturer that is exempt from breaking out here?
Not that I've ever seen.
Okay.
It give you an idea. I've seen people that can break an anvil with a rubber mallet. So everything has a breaking point if you push it hard enough.
Yeah, and there's definitely opportunities to do that out here just because of the slick rock, the terrain, the traction you get. I mean, things can snap pretty easily.
Yeah, you get down to power and traction and stuff, and something eventually is going to give if you combine the two with enough force.
Okay, well, let's get into this top 10 list, starting with number 10. Okay, what's number 10 on our list here, Milt?
Wheels, wheel studs, lug nuts, missing lug nuts, things like that. We see quite a few of.
Okay.
If you ever get a wheel that's running with the lug nuts loose on it, it tends to wear and fatigue the lug nuts. And a lot of times you'll get them fatigued enough, they will break off. And if enough of them break off, your wheel will depart.
Yeah, that's super important. I personally had a lug nut snap on me. It's important that when you put new wheels on that you torque them down, right?
Yeah, especially a brand new aluminum wheel, you want to torque them down to the specified torque. And then we recommend that the customers have them checked at 100 miles and 200 miles as those stud or the lug nuts seat to the aluminum.
Yeah.
They sometimes need to be retorqued and tightened up a little more.
Okay. Now, so if we're out on the trail, one lug nut snaps, you're okay. You can limp home and get it fixed.
Yeah, if you're aware of it and you're careful with it, you check and make sure the rest of them are tight. You can drive in with a lug nut. I've seen them come in on just a couple of lug nuts.
Okay.
But you want to be aware of that, drive a little slower than you normally would, and be very careful.
Okay. Now, if they come to the shop, is that a pretty easy fix?
On some of them, it's actually fairly simple. You can drive the wheel stud out and press one in, sometimes without removing the hub or the axle shaft. Some vehicles, you can't get at them well without pulling the axle.
Okay.
But it varies from vehicle to vehicle.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. Make sure your lug nuts are torqued down to spec. Okay, what's next on our list?
Okay, next is diff covers, axle shaft seals.
Okay.
That may be leaking oil.
Okay. And now it's a good idea just to go ahead and replace your diff covers, because most of the ones from the OEM are pretty thin.
They're thinner than your aftermarket stuff. If you're prone to hitting them or dragging them over rocks, the aftermarket covers are nice because they're much thicker.
Okay.
And will hold up to a lot more abuse than the factory covers.
Yeah. I know I've replaced mine as well, and I've had my axle shafts leak a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about if that happens, what caused it, and what can I do?
Okay, a lot of times we see a lot of front axle shaft seals leak. You'll get oil that'll drip out of the C at the end of the axle tube. A little bit is not a big serious problem. If you're dumping a lot of oil out of it, it's something that you want to fix, because otherwise it'll leave an awful mess on your garage floor.
Well, right, yeah.
But the front seals are a little more in depth in fixing. You have to pull the axle shafts completely out, pull the differential out in order to get at the seals to replace them.
Okay. Fair to say that those are two things that really could be prevented before you even get here.
A lot of times you can. If you notice you're wet around your diff covers, it can be resealed, whether you put a gasket in or use RTV to seal it up. If you do a factory cover back on it, you want to make sure that if there's any burrs or sharp edges that you use a file, clean those off so it seals and sits tight.
And if you, let's say I bust a diff cover open, I'm leaking all over the place, can I drive down here to the shop, or what should I do?
If you've lost all the oil out of it, that's a concern. You may want to look, if it's a front end and you have hubs that can be turned out so it's not turning the axle, you'd be safe to drive it back.
Okay.
If it's a live axle that turns all the time and you have very far to go, you may want to look at getting a cover put on it and put oil in it before you drive it back.
Okay, so that may mean sending a buddy out to the shop, grab what you need, and come
possibly,
to it, fix there on the trail.
Okay.
Right.
Save you having to rebuild the entire front end.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Definitely a cost saving there. Good, that's good knowledge. Okay, Milt, I know this next one is a pretty common issue. What are we talking about now?
Okay, we're talking about brake lines.
Yeah.
Brake lines are something we don't think about an awful lot of the time, but if you lose one out on the trail, it gets really exciting depending on where you're at.
Right.
A lot of times we see a suspension that will flex further than the brake line will reach, and you can pull it loose, you can rupture or break the end out of the brake line, and then you lose your brake fluid, lose your brakes, and then you've got a problem.
Now, what are some things you can do before you get here to prevent that from happening?
As you're building it, if you're building it or having it built, if they flex it out and check those things in the process before it ever leaves, you can check, make sure you have enough room on your brake lines that when the suspension is drooped out completely, that you've got a little bit of slack in your brake line, it's not stretched tight.
Right.
Or when your wheels turn, that the wheel doesn't catch the brake line and pull it into the tread and pull it loose.
Okay.
In many cases we'll see on especially the four-door Jeeps, when they've been modified, a lot of times that rear sway bar link will catch a brake line running along the frame, pull it down. I've seen them actually pull them and break the ends clear off. We run them up and tuck them above the frame where they can't be reached by the sway bar bolts. Yeah. And keep them safe.
Yeah, I know I carry extra brake lines and brake fluid because I've never personally had one break, but I've been out 2 times that I can recall where I've had somebody that busted a brake line, and it was nice to be able to fix it when we were out on the trail.
Yeah, we've seen that quite often. There actually, some companies make a little pinch clamp you can put over a brake line, bolt them down tight to secure it so you're not losing brake fluid out of that wheel, and you can still get back with it. And some people get creative. If you got vice grips, I've seen that. There's several ways to kind of do a field patch so you can get back safely.
Right, yeah. Now, Milt, it was 102 out here in Moab yesterday. It gets hot out here. What's the next one we're going to talk about here?
We're going to talk about engine cooling systems. We see quite a bit of heating problems that people come out. If you're from a cool climate, high elevation climate, things like that, you might not be noticing heating problems. You get here on a good hot day, going slow, a lot of times you'll see that you're heating up. That's something that I recommend people check. Make sure your radiator is clear full, that you have the proper amount in your overflow bottle. One of the issues we see a lot with the Jeeps is people will see, oh, this bottle's not clear full, and they'll fill their overflow bottle clear full. And then when the engine does heat up, it'll expand, it'll push out, and then they panic thinking they've got a coolant leak when it isn't necessarily the case.
Right.
So if they look closely, there's a full mark, a maximum, and a minimum mark on those bottles, and you want to know where those are, because you get quite a bit of expansion on some of these newer vehicles. The other thing is if you're running a vehicle that's a belt-driven fan, make sure your belts are in good shape, that they're going to operate. If they have a fan clutch on them, make sure they're operating properly so that you get good airflow at slow speeds. And if you're running electric fans, like a lot of the new vehicles are, you want to make sure they're in good operating. If you check those things before you come out, it will save you a lot of grief at times.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you will have a thermostat issue or something that will sneak up on you. But normally you'll see that heat up really fast if it's a thermostat.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on that temperature gauge when you're out here, and it's good to carry some water or coolant. I know the JKs are very specific about what kind of coolant you can put in there, so you got to be careful about that, right?
Most of your newer vehicles specify which coolant they want in them, and they recommend you don't mix certain coolants together. So be aware of what coolant your vehicle takes.
Yeah, that's super important. Okay, what's next on our list?
Okay, next is sway bars and sway bar links. A lot of people will disconnect these when they're off-road. They get better articulation, better axle movement. Some of your vehicles will have automatic disconnects on them. Some of them are manual disconnects. We see a lot of broken links come in. They'll be running without them disconnected, and they'll put a lot of strain on them. Sometimes you'll break the end of a sway bar link off, or the mount or something. Coming off the trail, it's relatively safe enough to drive with them off, as long as they're out of the way, not getting in the road of the suspension or touching a wheel or something. But for highway use, it's a lot more comfortable to have your sway bars hooked up if you're driving at highway speeds. If you've got a long way to drive home on the freeway, or you want to have those operating. Right. You can drive it without them, but you need to be aware of it, because of high-speed turns and that, you'll get a lot more body roll in it.
Yeah, so, out here in Moab, you're gonna get flexy. So take the time just to disconnect those things, and give you better traction and better articulation on the trail anyway.
Yeah.
And help prevent some of that stuff from breaking. You recommend aftermarket end links and all that stuff?
A lot of times you can get them in heavier. Some of the aftermarket aren't heavier.
Okay.
Some of them are. A good heavy sway bar link, you'll be less likely to have problems with them breaking. Another thing we see a lot of is if they get the wrong length of sway bar link on the front, and they articulate way down, and the link will, what we call cam over.
Yep.
It comes back up, it's pointed the wrong direction, it'll bind against the steering. You either have to take it apart or flex it back up and push it back. Generally that cam over comes from having the wrong length, usually too short of a sway bar link.
Yeah.
So when you're putting them together, be aware of the distances. If you can, droop the suspension out and check it.
Yeah, we had that exact thing happen to a friend of mine. He had just installed coilovers on his Jeep, and we were on Poison Spider, and he's like, something's wrong with my Jeep, guys, and sure enough, his sway bar end link had cammed out. So it was an easy fix, but something to be mindful of. Now, when we're out here on the slick rock, we got bigger tires, our steering's working harder, right?
Oh yeah.
So next on our list is
steering. Whether it be the power steering pump, whether it be the steering box, or the linkage to the steering. We see quite a few issues with power steering. From the frame fracturing, where it bolts in and cracking, have to repair the frame, or if we have a power steering pump that is just fatigued and going out. Steering boxes, occasionally I've had them come in with a pitman shaft broken off of the box, which is you're putting in a new box.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can do for it. One is make sure your steering, your power steering fluid is full and operating properly. Periodically get underneath, have a look at things. If you see anything loose, I see a lot of pitman arm, the nut that holds the pitman arm. It's amazing how many of those I find that are loose when a customer comes in.
Really?
A lot of play in them.
Huh.
So if you see a gap between the lock washer and the nut, put a wrench on it.
Okay.
Suck that up, make sure those are tight. You don't want that coming off, because it's real trouble.
Yeah.
We see quite a few power steering failures on vehicles with very large tires. An upgrade on that is a power assist ram that really helps turn those tires.
Right.
Makes it easier on the driver. So there's several things you can do to upgrade your steering, but the one thing you really need to do is pay attention to it, check it with some regularity, make sure things are tight. You don't have any loose joints. If you have loose tie rod ends, things like that, they can affect your steering, and everybody knows about death wobble, or almost everybody knows about it. And if you've never experienced it, the first time it comes in, you will not forget it.
That's true.
So that's all tied in with steering, so be aware of that, and be aware of the newest Jeeps out now have electric power steering pumps on them. We are starting to see some issues with those when you have the very large tires. You get hot oil lights for steering, different things for that. Be aware of those things as you upgrade in tire size and axle size. Steering is something that many people forget to look at.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I've upgraded my steering box in my Wrangler and all the steering linkage because we've been out on the trail where somebody had, his steering box just basically blew up. It was boiling over, and getting somebody off the trail when they don't have steering, boy, it makes for a challenging day.
it makes for a very long day.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to number 4. Now we're getting to the most common stuff you see. What's next?
Okay, something we see a lot of are driveline issues and U-joint problems. Yeah. And that's something that can sneak up on you and just happen all at once, or sometimes it's something that just hasn't been checked and kind of overlooked and is already worn before you get out there, and then you might have a problem with it. It's something to be aware of. Anytime you're wheeling, especially rock crawling in a lot of deep and heavy rock and things like that, if you get against a drive line with the weight of the vehicle on a drive line, you want to look at that closely, because if you dent, bend, or crease that drive line, it's going to put a weak point in it. And we see a lot of them will twist in two when they get an impact mark on them.
Right.
So one thing, checking ahead of time before you head out. We had a customer out of Texas. I felt so bad for him. They'd towed it clear out here from Texas to go wheeling, and he just had it worked on. But in the process of coming out, the driveline had not been put on tight, and it came loose.
Oh.
And as it flew around, because it come loose of the differential, it fractured the transfer case housing, broke his transfer case. So he'd driven clear out from Texas. When he got here, he was busted, could not wheel, had to turn around, tow it all the way back home.
Wow.
So checking stuff before you go is really important. Carrying an extra U-joint, if you just break the cross in a U-joint and you haven't torn up the rest of it, you can change one on the trail.
Sure.
It's not as easy as it is in the shop on a table, but you can do it in the field.
Yep.
And you can salvage your day wheeling and still go on and enjoy it. Many people will carry extra drive lines, which is a great thing. If you've got the room and can afford to have the extra parts, it's a great thing to have, because you do break one, you swap it out, and you're back on the road and you're still going.
Yeah, I think knowing how to swap a U-joint is a really valuable tool. I think everybody should take an opportunity, at least watch a video, and at least have a good understanding of how to do that. And then carrying the right size, right? Making sure you have 1310 or 1350. Having one or two of those. When we did the Rubicon Trails several years ago, we all had the same vehicle, and so what we did is one guy would take a front, one guy would take a rear, and then we had them if we needed them. But the good news is well, except for the guy in Texas, if you bust a drive line, usually you can just pull it and wheel out on front wheel drive or wheel drive, and it might make it a little harder, but you just get out of the trail.
Generally the case. Yeah.
All right, number 3 on our list is
ring and pinions, gears, lockers. That's something that usually out here, when it gets broken, it usually comes almost immediately on them. Occasionally we'll get them come in that are saying, hey, this thing's making noise, can you check it? And if you have bearings go out, it can create some issues and noise. And if you catch it early, you can a lot of times save the ring and pinions. Sometimes they just break a ring and pinion set from working him too hard. Wheel hop is a real gear killer.
Yeah.
As they bounce up and down and come down hard under power, the impact a lot of times will shatter. And it's usually pretty easy to tell whether it's an impact break on ring and pinions. But we do a lot of them here. I can't even remember how many we've done since February this year.
Yeah.
It's been a lot.
The last time I was here, we were with a guy, and he was in a Wrangler Sport, and he had 37s on the stock axles, and we were going up top of the world, and he was just climbing up one of the sections, but he was doing exactly what we were talking about. He was spinning, and that traction is just, it's so grippy, and it bounced, and you just heard it, bam! bam, and just snapped right out.
Yeah, so it's pretty obvious. When you hear a bang, it's either usually the ring and pinion or a drive line that you've broken.
Yeah.
And it's just one that your stomach sinks when you hear that bang.
Yeah.
But we do see a lot of that. Driving styles contribute a lot to that. Lots of high mileage, lots of use on them, so it's something that you should be aware of periodically. Change the oil in the differentials. It doesn't have to be really regular, but as they say, the more you use it, the harder you use it, the more frequent you should do that.
Right.
Then the lockers, we see a lot of issues with lockers, whether it be an ARB air locker or the electric locker in the JKs, the JLs, things like that. We get a lot of people coming in with JLs that have lockers that stick in and won't disengage. And a lot of times we can free those up without opening the differential by going through the fill plug hole with a tool I've got that we can free them up. But I always tell them, when you use this locker again, it more than likely will stick and not disengage as well. Right. So you can either drive home, or the fix on that is replacing the magnet assembly in there that activates the locker. Okay. They develop a rib on them that will catch them and won't let them release.
So if you bust a ring and pinion or your locker is messed up internally out on the trail, there's not much fix you're really going to do on the trail. You really just got to get to the shop the best you can.
Yeah, generally, like I say, some external airlines, if you've got a line repair kit or something, you can fix those. Yeah. But if it's inside, generally it's something you're going to want to get back and get it taken care of then.
Got it. We're almost to number one, but number two on the list is
axle shafts. We see a lot of axle shaft problems, whether it be broken shaft or say a front shaft with a bad joint in it. Occasionally the stub shaft is broken, but we do see a lot of that. Occasionally the bearing on the axle shaft on the rear, sometimes you'll lose a bearing. Those are generally something you can fix. Put a new bearing assembly seal on them, get them taken care of. But we do see a lot of broken axle shafts. A lot of time that is from serious horsepower or larger tires or lots of throttle under hopping conditions. So a lot of times they'll break an axle.
Not vehicle specific in this case?
Not necessarily. We see it in pretty much everything. Yeah. They all do the same thing. They transfer the power from the differential out to the wheel. And if they get the right kind of impact, or if they're just a lot of miles and tired and worn and fatigued, we see a lot of axles. We'll pull shafts out if we have one side broken, and we pull the other side and look at it, and you'll see a twist in the splines where they're getting ready to give up. Yeah. And if you find that, that's probably the time to change that axle before it leaves you being towed or walking out on the trail somewhere.
Yeah. Chromoly axle shafts are good insurance, but they're not even foolproof either, correct?
No, they're a great upgrade, and but yeah, they are breakable. Yeah. It's there's, like say we talked before, there's nothing that I've seen that's unbreakable. Yeah. But there are some that are much better than others, and you have a lot of your chromoly shafts, a lot of your companies that will warranty that axle shaft if it breaks. So if you have a chromoly shaft and you've got it broken or something, don't throw it away. Keep that so that you can get it warrantied out. RCV shafts are one that we don't see a large number of those shafts broken. Okay. Although I have seen some broken. I've had one of my guys shear a stub shaft off. Yeah. So it can be done, but it's not as common, say, as an OEM axle shaft. Yeah.
Now, if you're out on the trail, you bust an axle shaft, what do you recommend?
Well, it depends on which shaft and what vehicle. If you're in an early TJ and you've got a 35 axle shaft and you break it, your wheel's going to walk out on you. It creates a real problem for getting it home. It's not going to be an easy retrieval on one of those. Some of your axles that have pressed on bearing and a bolt-in retainer, you can slowly drive off and get down. But sometimes you can actually do internal damage with that, depending on how it's broken. A lot of shafts will spiral break inside the differential. Then as that turns, that tends to grind things up inside the carrier. Yeah. And in some cases, I've had to replace lockers that people have driven in on because it just had too much wear in them.
Yeah. Yeah, we've replaced an axle shaft out on the trail. Thankfully, we had a spare. I think it's a good practice to do for folks. I mean, you can do that in your garage, just pull it out, put it back in, just so you at least have an understanding of how to do it. But if you don't have a spare, you're going to be sending a buddy usually to go find a shop, and hopefully they've got what you need.
Yeah, like I say, ideally is if you can get something and change it out without driving it broken. That's usually easier on your piece of equipment.
Right.
But sometimes that's not an option.
Right, that's true. All right, Milt, we're to number one, but before we get to number one, we should mention that this is a pretty comprehensive list, but the list goes on and on and on and on.
Oh yeah, this is just a portion of the things that that we see that have gone wrong or broken or mishaps here in the wheeling industry.
Yeah, but I got to think, you're seeing electrical issues, you're seeing all kinds of other craziness as well, right?
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'll bet you've seen some stuff. It still takes you back a little bit, like, really?
Yeah, it's like, how did you do that?
Exactly. Okay, what's number one on our list?
Okay, one of the things we see the most of is broken brackets, particularly track bar mounting brackets and track bars. There's a lot of force that goes on those brackets. In applications where they are stock, it's not uncommon to see that track bar mount rip completely off an axle or sometimes off the frame end. The last one I did, it had ripped. They had welded an aftermarket bracket to the frame. It had ripped the frame out.
Wow.
So that repair had to entail reinforcing the frame and everything to get it done. But we do see a lot of that because there is a lot of force on that. We see them front and rear that break out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of aftermarket stuff that is very good that will reinforce and make that to where it's very unlikely that you'll have trouble with it, but depends on how hard it's used again.
Yeah.
But the factory stuff, we see a lot of those broken. They do make aftermarket brackets to put in those that are heavier duty that will hold up better. The track bars themselves, you can get heavy duty track bars. A real common thing we see with stock track bars is after a hard day of wheeling, they will flex enough that your steering wheel will actually be out of true enough to set your light on your dash.
Yeah.
And that's a relatively easy fix. You can adjust the collar on your drag link to compensate for that. But ideally, going to a heavier drag link will go a long way for that.
Yeah, track bar bracket, I broke mine a couple of years ago, and I had an aftermarket relocation bracket on there, which was pretty beefy, but that held up fine. But everything on the stock one that it was bolted to was just, all the welds were just sheared off on it.
That's one of the things we see a lot of is the aftermarket one will still be there, but the factory bracket it's bolted to will be broken off. In a lot of cases, when we do aftermarket track bar mounts on to reinforce them, we will actually weld them into place so that they normally just bolt in, but sometimes if those bolts come loose and start to work and walk, then it will fatigue, and it's just like taking a piece of baling wire. You bend it long enough, it's going to break in two.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I recommend people do, periodically, at least once a month or something. If you wheel a lot, get underneath, take a flashlight, and look at the brackets. If you see cracks in them, now's the time to fix them before they tear clear off, because it's a lot easier and cheaper beforehand than it is after.
Absolutely. No surprise to me that this was number one, because I've broken mine. My best friend Marco has broken his. We've repaired other guys, and it's always been a couple ratchet straps.
You can get off the trail generally with those. I've seen people break 2 or 3 ratchet straps before they get off.
Right.
But if you're careful and mindful, you can limp off the trail generally with a broken bracket, but you want to be very careful and take it slow and easy.
Well, Milt, thanks for helping me out with that comprehensive list. Let's just reiterate really quickly, before people come to Moab, before they have an issue, what should they do? What's the important things?
Well, I recommend to everybody, before you take off, whether it be Moab, Sand Hollow, the Rubicon, Black Bear, any of them, have a good look at your vehicle. Check your fluid levels. Check under your vehicle. If you've got a garage where you've got the capability, go through with wrenches, double check the bolts in them. We get a lot of people buying bolts that the bolts have fallen out on them while they're wheeling. So check those things for tight. Look for cracks in brackets, things like that. Anything that might give you grief on the trail that's going to possibly ruin your trip.
Right.
Nothing worse than get here and find out you can't wheel and have to turn around and go home.
Yeah.
A little bit of preventative maintenance will go a long way in making a trip really good and really fun.
Yeah. I agree 100%. Before we do long trips, I'll take a look at my vehicle, but sometimes it's good to have your buddy take a look at it, because sometimes we found that they'll see things that I didn't see, which is always nice to do. And then making sure when you're out here on the trail, making sure you're not solo, right? Because if something does break and you're out by yourself, that can be, you really find yourself in a pickle.
That's something we, in our other shop, we teach a Jeeping 101 class. That's a free class. It's a service we give out and teach at least once a month. And that's something we try to reiterate is, if at all possible, don't go Jeeping alone.
Absolutely.
Especially, I tell people, don't go any further out and you're willing to walk back.
Right.
Because if you're by yourself and you're broke down or stuck in something that you can't get out of, that's your next source of transportation is walking.
Absolutely.
And so, and if you do go alone, let somebody know where you're going and approximately when you're going to be back.
Yep.
So that if you don't come back, at least they have an idea where to look for you.
Right.
But if you kind of think ahead of time, think of things that can happen whenever, check those things over before you go, you're going to improve the quality of your trip. You're going to have more peace of mind, and if you get through unbroken, unscathed, you go home and you had a really good time.
Yeah.
But
great advice, Milt, and thank you so much, man.
Hey, you are welcome.
I appreciate it a lot. It's been a great conversation. I know these guys have gotten a lot of good value out of this. Guys, again, if you have not been to Moab, make a trip out here. You will love the trails, the scenery, and do yourself a favor. Stop by, see these guys here at Dixie. Maybe you don't need them, but just come by and say hello. Check out their shop. They've got a great shop, and they're here if you need you. All right, if you're visiting TrailRecon for the first time, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you as a member of the TrailRecon team. Thanks for watching.